time now for our press review. We're starting here in France, where a debate in Parliament descended into chaos over the question of Palestinian statehood. Antonia Kerrigan is here to tell us more. What are the papers saying?
Good morning, Karis. Yes, so during a debate yesterday in Parliament, an MP representing the left-wing France Unbowed party opened up a Palestinian flag in the chamber. This led to much of the chamber applauding, and the rest responded with uproar. The Speaker of the House shouted at him, called him to order and called the behaviour unacceptable before suspending the parliamentary session. Now, Le Figaro describes how this situation deteriorated further outside the chamber with two MPs, not the one pictured here, but two MPs involved or implicated or who feels strongly about this situation. One who is the MP representing French voters abroad in the region that includes Israel, extremely close to the Israeli right. His name is Maya Habib. Got into a near physical confrontation, exchange of insults with David Guiraud, also from France Unbowed party. An exchange that played out in front of the journalists on camera with near threats of physical confrontation. Now, the man pictured here, Sébastien Delogu, was sanctioned by the chamber. He received a 2-week suspension from Parliament. That is one of the heaviest sanctions that the chamber can hand down. And this, the communist paper L'Humanité has this piece looking into the practices around sanctions of MPs, and they suggest that there is an alarming rise in the number of sanctions. Apparently, the current speaker has handed down 145 sanctions since 2022 under this administration. Sanctions that they say have primarily targeted members of left-wing parties. That's to be compared with 39 sanctions between the years 1958 and 2021. So you can see that it has increased at a sharp rate. They say this is a tendency that poses democratic problems.
Right, well, still on the conflict in the Middle East, The Guardian has led an investigation into what looks like nearly a decade-long Israeli campaign of intimidation against prosecutors at the International Criminal Court.
That's quite right, Karis. So last week, after the ICC announced it would be seeking arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and his defence minister, the ICC prosecutor made a statement warning that all attempts to intimidate or influence himself or his colleagues must cease immediately. And it maybe wasn't very clear to us what that meant at the time, and this investigation maybe shed some light. Revelations suggest that apart from tapping the current head prosecutor Karim Khan's phone calls, messages and emails, his predecessor was subject to a long-running campaign of intimidation by Mossad. Sources at the ICC likened it to stalking, what she experienced, telling The Guardian that the then chief of Mossad told her, "You should help us and let us take care of you. You don't want to be getting into things that could compromise your security or that of your family." Now, she says, or they say in the investigation, that this campaign of intimidation began in 2015 after she had opened a preliminary investigation into crimes committed by individuals in Gaza, in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem.
All right, and a deep dive investigation led by an international consortium of journalists has brought shocking revelations about Rwanda and its president Paul Kagame pursuing dissidents abroad.
Yes, that's quite right. So this investigation was led by Forbidden Stories, and they started off investigating the fates of two journalists, one of whom fled abroad facing intimidation, the other of whom died in suspicious circumstances. But once they started digging, it became a much wider investigation. France Info cites one of the stories that is told in this investigation. That's the story of someone who left Rwanda for Belgium in 1996 and since became a human rights activist and a prominent campaigner against Paul Kagame's regime. And he describes burglaries in his Belgian home, intimidating voice messages sent to his daughter, and 3 men allegedly sent from Belgium to kill him. Perhaps most frighteningly of all is a man of Burundian nationality who befriended him in Belgium, invited him to visit his home country, Burundi, and once he boarded the plane, he realised that this was a trap, and in fact the plane was headed for Kigali. Once he arrived, he was arrested and spent 5 years in detention. So this is just one of many stories that they shed light on in this investigation. And what they have really looked deeply into is to what extent Rwanda has managed to instrumentalise its global diplomatic network to help the regime pursue and persecute Rwandan nationalists abroad.
All right, and lastly from you, Antonia, an environment story. 75 rivers in Alaska have started running orange in recent years due to the melting of the permafrost. What can you tell us about this?
Well, so it's a Smithsonian magazine that's got this story. Research shows that the colour change began as far back as 2008, and that as the permafrost melts, that's obviously one of the underground layers of the soil that remains at below freezing until it melts, of course. It contains all kinds of metals in its sediments, including iron, nickel and zinc. And as they are released, as they are melted, as they're exposed to the oxygen, they're, of course, have this reaction that creates this rusty colour. That's oxidised metal, that's rust. That's this orange we're recognising. In some of the waterways studied, the orange colour is so potent it can be seen from space. But it's not just an aesthetic problem. As macroinvertebrates are in decline in the rivers affected, that's things like insects as well as biofilms, that's microorganisms. They're at the very bottom, at the very heart of the food chain. So this could rule out certain rivers as habitats for fish in the future. And of course, as research continues, there are concerns that will need to be looked into further about what this could do to the quality of drinking water to local residents.
All right, certainly concerning stuff. Thank you, Antonia, for that look of the papers. We're going to take a short break, but we'll be back in a few minutes with more news.